Katie Hobbs, thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate this. The first question that we have are some voter vignettes. These are from regular everyday people that we were able to talk to for a quick on-cam. And the first one that we'll talk about is relevant given the ruling that happened on Friday. But can you outline on abortion the law that you think should be on the books regarding abortion in Arizona?
Well, I've been a long advocate during my time in the legislature against restrictions that were passed during my time there. The bottom line is that today there is no safe and legal abortion access in the state of Arizona, and I've said on day one I would call a special session to repeal that law, and it is out of touch with everyday Arizonans. Most Arizonans support some access to safe and legal abortion.
You're prepared to call a special session day one regarding abortion?
Yep, absolutely.
On inflation, some of the voters that we spoke with said inflation, of course, is out of control. You've seen it at the gas pump, you've seen it at the grocery store. What can you do as governor to address inflation?
Well, my campaign put out a comprehensive Affordable Arizona plan that talks about these issues because we know that families are struggling. My husband and I have raised 2 kids through financial ups and downs, and so we know what that feels like when you're struggling to put food on the table. Our plan addresses pocketbook issues, things that folks buy every day, calling for some tax cuts on school supplies, over-the-counter medication, things like that. And then we also have a plan to put people back to work in higher paying jobs by addressing access to childcare assistance and refundable tax credit for pursuing career and technical education.
A lot of other states do that. And do you think there's a reason why Arizona has yet to do a tax-free weekend or tax-free school supplies, or even for feminine products like you mentioned yourself?
I don't know the answer to that. We're one of very few states that don't, and that's why we called for that in our plan.
Tied to inflation, affordable housing.
Yeah.
When I just moved here not too long ago in the November timeframe, and it was I was told by the Realtor Association that if you want a house in Arizona, to put your battle gear on. You have to go and that has changed as interest rates have kind of started to rise. But voters that we spoke with said the population boom in Arizona is leading to less affordable housing, and they're concerned about having an affordable place to live. Do you have plans on trying to tackle affordable housing in Arizona?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues that I talk to voters about, and it's one of the biggest things that's driving inflation here in the state. So the fact is that we don't have a supply that's meeting demand, and even though we're continuing to see housing go up everywhere, it's still out of reach for many Arizonans. And so as the governor, I would plan to work with local jurisdictions to remove statutory barriers that keep them from developing more affordable housing, and just ensure that we're working as a partner to help communities meet the housing needs of their citizens.
That's a tough policy to promise, right? Because building takes time. Supply chain issues play a big role here, but the key focus to helping curb and make housing more affordable in Arizona would be to rip down some of these limitations, these exceptions, whatever they may be, these building codes that prevent affordable housing, and then once you're able to remove those, then you can build that affordable housing, right?
Well, I think there's certainly, I don't want to blanket and say all the
Sure.
restrictions, but there's certainly some statutory barriers that we can look at that would help communities do more to develop affordable housing.
To advocate for community housing, okay. So on education, or better yet, water. Voters tell us that they want to know what you'll do as governor concerning water in Arizona, especially given the drought and the lowering water levels of Lake Mead, Powell, and the Colorado River.
Yeah, this is a huge issue, and I'm hearing from everywhere I go in the state, folks are concerned about water. It's about time, because we've been at a point where we're getting to this crisis point for a long time, and I think leadership has really kicked the can down the road. So we have a comprehensive plan, Resilient Arizona, that talks about not only water, but how that's impacted by the climate crisis and how we can do some things there to impact that, which is obviously exacerbating drought and water shortages. We need to put all the ideas on the table for augmentation, conservation, and we have to put everything on the table.
Some of the ideas that have been brought up by engineers in our building include trying to grab from other bodies of water that could be like hundreds, maybe not thousands miles away. We're talking like the Mississippi. Is that something that you'd be open into, to trying to look into that type of major infrastructure deal to take from a body of water like the Mississippi over here to Arizona?
Well, let me say this. My opponent has suggested that as a solution, and a lot of experts have weighed in that it is just not a realistic solution. And the fact is that you have thousands of miles that you'd have to build a pipeline over a mountain range, and then the electricity to pump the water up those mountains to get here. So if all of that were feasible, if there was a way that we could pay for that, which would be probably more than billions of dollars, probably, and then the time factor, it's 30 years away before that's ever something that's realistic. So we have more immediate options to look at here, and that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, even more so than the affordable housing promise. Trying to get these up is trying to get an infrastructure across, the continental U.S.
Yeah.
To education. Arizonans, as we spoke to, are concerned about the state of public education in our state, whether it be funding, teacher pay, or the new voucher system.
Yeah.
So what can you do as governor to address public schools in Arizona?
I mean, public schools is the focus of my education plan. It's the way that we make sure that every single student, no matter where they live, has access and the same opportunities. We can talk about putting resources into the vouchers, which go to private schools for the most part, or building more charter schools. But the fact is, if we are not investing in traditional public school, we are cheating a lot of our kids. And that's where the focus needs to be. So in my education plan, you'll see a call for more accountability for charter schools, getting rid of the vouchers, which right now those signatures are at my office being verified, and investing in K-12, not just K-12, but even universal access to early childhood education, which gets our kids off to the right start. And we need to incentivize keeping more quality teachers in our classrooms, because we're losing them. There's not a teacher shortage. There's a shortage of people who want to teach because of the conditions they're in right now, and that includes pay. I have 2 sisters that are teachers, and so I'm hearing firsthand from them every day.
Equity in education is obviously a key part of your education platform. When I've covered you in the past, I just try to describe it: public schools over private schools. I wanted to ask you, how can you also include charter schools and private schools into your plan, or is that part of your plan as well?
Look, I have nothing against nothing against private schools, but our taxpayer dollars should not be subsidizing wealthy parents to send their kids to private schools, and that's what the voucher system we have in the state, the ESAs, do. As far as charter schools, again, they're part of the overall education landscape we have in the state. I'm not suggesting we go back. We need to have more accountability in place, and I think folks in the charter school board are open to that.
2 more on the voter vignette stuff. We spoke with those who were divided on how they feel about the border. Some say that we should devote more resources to allow more migrants into the country. Others told us that they don't believe in an open border. How do you, as a candidate for governor, plan to tackle immigration, especially at the Arizona border? I think also in your policy, you had mentioned trying to have some of these people who may not be legal U.S. citizens help with the labor shortage.
Yeah, so let me start this answer by saying that my opponent is offering no solutions on the border. She's only offering empty rhetoric. She's called to dismantle the nation's top law enforcement agency, which would do nothing but put Arizonan safety and security at risk. And she's not offering any real solutions. Border security is important. Nobody's going to argue with that. And we need the federal government to do more. But I have 2 border sheriffs who have endorsed my border plan because they know that it is what we need. I'm going to focus on making sure that Arizona resources are going to help those border communities and provide meaningful relief to Arizonans who have borne the brunt of decades of inaction from Washington on this issue. And we need Washington to act. As governor, I will work with our congressional delegation to help get comprehensive reform over the finish line.
You've also mentioned adding resources for law enforcement, I think you just said. Is there anything specific that you think, for those who say, what's your plan? You mentioned Kari Lake. What's your plan? What are some of those things that you think could be both short and long term when it comes to the border?
Yeah, so I specifically talked about sending the resources to the local communities and talking with local law enforcement leaders. They need more intelligence and cooperation from DPS. They need more just direct support for vehicle, technology, personnel, whatever that is.
Is there a false understanding of how the border operates among our voters in our state, that a lot that's done at the border is federal and that your hands are tied when it comes to the state operation? Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that what we see is a lot of political stunts. I don't think we should be using taxpayer resources to do political stunts. We should use taxpayer resources to provide meaningful support and relief for Arizonans. And so that's where I would focus on that issue.
And like some of the things that we've seen at the border, it further divides the political nature that we've lived in. So voters that we spoke to feel like the politicians aren't working together and they feel more divided due to the current political atmosphere. How do you, and this perhaps is the hardest question, reach across the aisle and work with Republicans as a Democratic governor?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality that we're in is that I've never seen them as divided as they are. And I was elected to the legislature in 2010. The Republicans had a supermajority, and we could still work together. And it's gotten worse and worse. And in my current position, a lot of the legislators who will be serving are legislators who have attacked me, who have ginned up rhetoric that has incited harassment and threats. And yet we have these pressing issues that we have to deal with, and we have to work together to do that. So I'm not going to stop trying.
It's all about just persistence. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to switch gears. Some of these questions are going to overlap. So switching back to affordability, looking at your policies this morning, and as I've been covering your campaign, I'm sorry I couldn't have made it out to more of the campaign stops to see how you interact with voters. But I think that in my mind, when I read some of these policies, one thing that would be something that you would want to tout, which is something that perhaps your opponent doesn't, is you want to create a tax-free weekend and exempt tax for school supplies, feminine hygiene products throughout the year. How do you do that as governor? Is that just something you say, I declare tax-free, and how do you explain that to people that what you want to do? You could say you want to do it, but how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, it'll require cooperation from the legislature to do that.
Okay, and so once if you get that is a goal of yours to try and curb the affordability in Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here's the other, perhaps uncomfortable question, but unemployment in Arizona today is at 3.5%. Some people would look and say the leadership that is in power today has put us at a very low unemployment rate at 3.5%. On an economy, how do you top, this is what some would say, how do you top what some of the Arizona leaders have already done when it comes to the economy?
Well, I certainly think that Arizona has experienced tremendous economic growth. We're seeing that in revenue collection, where we have record revenue collection that's allowed the legislature to make historic investments over the past legislative session. $1 billion new for water infrastructure, $1 billion new in K-12. So we need to keep doing those things. The problem is that economic growth has not gone down to all Arizonans. And so we need to make sure that we're ensuring that every Arizona can thrive, that they have the resources and tools to get into high-paying jobs. Because at the same time that we're experiencing this tremendous economic growth, people are still struggling. Even those employed people who can't afford housing, who are being pinched every time they go to the grocery store.
I just wanted to get your reaction. The Civil War era abortion ban that penalizes providers with jail time. What can you do to fight back against what was already ruled? You mentioned it already.
Yeah, it is utterly devastating. I want to mention that my opponent has supported this law and would uphold it. And on day one, I'm going to call a special session to repeal this law.
Special session. That's right. Thank you. And then, okay, this is the two more. You tweeted about the petition that blocked the expansion to the school voucher program on Friday. Today, the Goldwater Institute said that the review of the signatures has the teacher union just falling short of the signature needed. I'm not asking you to comment on that. I am asking you as Secretary of State if you can comment on how the petition signatures are processed.
We're in process right now, and so I can't really say more than that.
Okay. Just in the process itself, is there a time frame that you would be able to share on how long you think that would take?
I think we're looking at a couple of weeks before we have a final number of what's been officially turned in.
It's my last question. I understand that this is an uncomfortable topic, but some felt that the GOP primary debate was just disjointed and light on policy, but it happened to be a procedural part of that election. You didn't debate then against Marco Lopez, the former mayor of Nogales, and you may not have needed to, Katie, because you ended up winning, what was it, 70% of the Democratic vote?
Yeah, I won by 50 points.
Right, by half, okay. Now at every turn, Kari Lake has brought up your decision not to debate her against Ted at Arizona PBS, Arizona Horizon. We talk a lot, Katie, about fighting for Arizonans. Why not show that fight and debate Kari Lake?
Look, I see interviews like this as a perfect opportunity to have a discussion where we can talk about the things I bring to the table, how I'll govern, the ideas that we have for solutions for the issues that Arizonans are struggling with right now. I'm not going to give a platform for someone to just spew conspiracy theories. And if you watched the Secretary of State debate, it gave you a sample of what we'd see. I don't want to give a platform to that. And I would much rather give Arizonans an opportunity to hear directly from me, interviews like this, other forums that will be broadcast that we've committed to participating in.
It could be uncomfortable, that moment itself. You still wouldn't want to go and dive into that because you're afraid of the idea that it wouldn't be beneficial to the voter.
It is. The voters got nothing from that GOP primary debate except for an entertaining circus, and it ended up as an embarrassment to Arizona, and I'm not going to be a part of that.
I'm supposed to ask you now, what if there's one thing that you like about Kari Lake?
She has a good haircut.
Katie Hobbs,